DM073 Gaming is brought to you by Happy Little Hug Factory. If you're looking for pre-orders of the upcoming sets, including singles or booster boxes of previous sets that have come out, you can check the link down below. Happy Little Hug Factory also has a buy list for Force of Will, so you can get rid of those extra cards you have laying around and turn it into new upcoming product. Thanks so much, guys. Check them out and enjoy the video.
Hey there guys, DM073 here, bringing you a kind of weeks and a half-ish worth of spoilers for Winds of the Ominous Moon, and we're going to start with Wind, we're going to end with Wind. So first up, we're going to go ahead and start with last week's Wind spoilers. It's a lot of more elemental stuff. We have the 5th element, which is a Spirit Magic Chant. Quick cast, reveal any number of elementals from your hand, deals 300 damage to target J-Res for each card revealed this way. I really like this card a lot in this kind of whole idea of kind of like Power Rangers style elementals, like with all the different kind of elementals that we just got in the different colors. This is kind of like Leaf Assassin, only just a chance, does more damage, and is a spirit magic, so it can be cast for free. So I'm actually really a huge fan of this card. I think if you're playing that kind of elemental swarm style that Gil might potentially be playing, I think this is a pretty good card for that style. To go along with that, we have Leaf Paladin, 3-drop 5/5 Leaf Elemental. When he enters the field, you search for a Light Elemental, Fire Elemental, Water Elemental, and Darkness Elemental, reveal them, and put them into your hand. So you immediately search for 4 cards just like that and refill your hand. So that combos really well with 5th Element, right? So the imagining is if you are playing all 5 colors, you can play Leaf Paladin, banish an elemental from your graveyard, and then immediately cast 5th Element and deal 1200 damage to something. I think this is really, really cool. I think it's a really unique design, and again, that kind of Power Rangers style of Gil. We have Leaf Dragon, who's a pretty interesting kind of high-cost leaf creature. 4-drop 9/9 elemental dragon with flying, who then every turn, once per turn, can remove an elemental from his graveyard to put a +1/+1 counter on it. I think this is also pretty cool as a potential high, like finishing style kind of boss monster, because of the fact that the longer it stays on board, the more kind of devastating it can become, and the fact that it does have flying, I think, is also very relevant for it. So interesting to see what happens. I honestly could see this card being a pretty big bomb and limited. Spirit Searching is just a 2-drop spirit magic that searches your deck for a chant, you reveal it, and put it into your hand. So this is kind of like a Gil's chant search effect on his J-Ruler side, just for his ruler side. So not a huge fan of it really, but it is interesting. The fact that it's a spirit magic is pretty interesting too. Very glad it's not instant speed. If it was instant speed, I think it'd be just a little bit too crazy for Gil to be able to search 2 cards per turn. Next, going into our white stuff, we have the Aura of Hope, 1-drop, chant aura, quick cast, rest, target J-Res. Very important to have this in response to the 1-drop recover, target J-Res. Very interesting there, and keynote it is an aura, so this will come into play later. Next up, we have Grimia's Fairy. So obviously Grimia is coming back. 2-drop 5/5 Fairy Tale Fairy. Just has flying and drain. I think this is actually going to be a pretty solid card for limited. 2-drop with that 5/5 stat line that starts with flying and has drain too, I think can actually be pretty significant. So especially in the limited format. In the main deck, New Frontiers constructed, I'm not sure, but it is an interesting card nonetheless. Next up, we have a Mother's Love, 1-drop chant aura. Either draw a card or prevent the next 800 damage that would be dealt to target J-Res or yourself for the turn. So, more anti-burn stuff. I really like this card a lot. I think it's going to be very interesting as a sideboard card, especially in white decks. If they main deck a couple, they can kind of protect themselves and then sideboard it against burn if needed, which I think is pretty cool. Next up, last up, we have the second advent of the Hope Grimia. 5-drop 12/12 Fairy Tale Avatar. If you're less than 2,000 life, so if you take a lot of damage, it just costs double white. And you can remove an aura in your graveyard from the game to give it flying, drain, and barrier. So just like that, you get something that can't be targeted, it flies over stuff, and then if it deals damage, you gain 12 life, which is huge for the fact that if you're only playing it for 2 when you're down to 2,000 life. Really like this card, really like the artwork, interesting to see where it comes from, where it goes to. Going into red, we have the Howell Pig Squadron, 3-drop 8/8 with swiftness and precision. When it dies, you get to go for a Howell Pig and put it into the field. Or if you control Piggy, you get to search your deck for any number of Howell Pigs and put them into the field. and they all gain swiftness. All the pigs that are brought in from Pig Squadron gain swiftness. This seems really, really strong. I definitely think that it's a very powerful card. It needs to combo with Piggy to be able to get the most value off of it. So obviously Piggy's already been a pretty hot ticket to something to kill. I think this is just going to put an even bigger target on its back, but it is interesting to see that we're getting this kind of high stat, swiftness, and precision for a 3-drop. So interesting to see kind of where that goes from here. We have Firebird, 1-drop Battle Art Chant, non-quick cast. It says deals 400 damage to target J-Res. If it was awakened, it can't be chased, and it deals 600 damage instead. And it removes 4 strength counters to awaken. I really think it's cool that Keurig has this kind of like uncancelable burn spell, specifically for, you know, J/Res, but considering the fact that Tales of a Powerless Dragonoid is already a good card against Keurig, I think it's pretty cool that he's getting a card that he can't be chased. So interested to see that kind of weird support coming for Keurig. Next up, we have Ground and Air Supremacy. It is a 1-drop battle art that you have to remove 5 strength counters to cast it, and you can either search for Paye Eli, the 2-drop, and put it into the field, then shuffle your deck, or deal 1,000 damage to target J/Res if at resolution you control Piale Eli. I think this card is very, very strong. The fact that essentially on your turn 1 you can burn 3 strength counters to put out a 2-drop 9/9 is a really good avenue. It's a cool deck thinning strategy for red. And then next turn, you know, you play Piggy and you can get a lot of crazy damage in. So all in all, I think this is a pretty cool card. Definitely a consistency booster for red, considering they still really have yet to see any consistent draw power coming their way, which is great because red was never really supposed to have lots of draw power. So pretty cool. Scarlet's Testament, 1-drop aura. It says quick cast, target resonator gains swiftness. Thank goodness this doesn't say J-Res, otherwise I would have to complain about this card needing to be nerfed in some way. Giving a resonator swiftness is something that we've had before. Literally, you can just use sprinting flame horse instead to give something swiftness and, you know, the stat boost. But when that sprinting flame horse rotates out, it's going to be cool that we're going to still have this kind of effect available. Plus, it's an aura, which works potentially really well with Grimia. Next up, we have Time Composing Elf, 1-drop 4/4, tap it to look at the top card of your deck, and you can choose to put it at the bottom of your deck. I'm really glad this card doesn't say draw a card, otherwise I'd have to murder this card with Flyer. I think that being able to scry while keeping it on a body, I mean, it's probably fine. We already have cards like Approaching the Truth, which really do the same kind of thing. This is just on a body, and in the sealed format, I actually think this card can be pretty important because you only have 25 cards, and you kind of really want to get cards that you need before you see anything else. So I definitely can see this card seeing play in that format. Next up, we have Essence of the Void, 3-drop 8/8 Cthulhu, randomly coming back, and when it enters the field, you destroy target damaged resonator. So it's like Umashima Taro, but a 3-drop 8/8 instead of a 2-drop 5/7. Next up, you have Praying Mermaid, 3-drop 8/8. At the beginning of your turn, it becomes Thunderstorm. Sorry, at the beginning of your main phase, it becomes Thunderstorm until end of turn. Very, very cool for limited play, being able to have a way to get Thunderstorm pretty quickly and accessibly, and it just kind of stays there until the end of the turn. So, and the stat line's pretty good. So I'm interested to see if Mermaids kind of go that route more. Next up, we have probably my favorite spell so far, Distortion of Time. 1-drop, look at the top card of your deck, put it on the bottom of your deck if you want to, then draw a card, and you can God's Art for Chronos Break, which is 1 blue, 1 Time Will, and a colorless. Remove it from the graveyard to kind of as part of the cost. Your opponent skips their next recovery phase, and you can only use this ability during your turn. So keep in mind, recovery phase means no stones untapping, no Jade Ruler, no Ruler untapping, no Resonators untapping, no additions untapping, nothing. Everything stays kind of locked in place for what their end of their last turn was. And with Time Spinning Witch, you can technically use this God Art twice, because her God Art resets all the God's Arts. So I think this is very, very cool, and is definitely something that would be necessary probably for the Time Spinning Witch to be able to reset the game pretty consistently, being able to take those multiple turns in a sense by locking your opponent down. So it's very interesting just overall, and I would be interested to see, you know, having that weird kind of draw, being able to scry and draw, I think is something that deck could probably really make use of too. Next up, we have Lightning Speed Crash, 3-drop Chant Aura, deals 800 damage to target rested J-Res. If it's Thunderstorming, deals 1200 damage instead. I really like this card. I think it's a little bit overcosted, but it is definitely, I mean, some spot removal in Limited that I think could see some play. The Last Thunder, 3-drop Chant. It gains Quick Cast as long as it's in your hand and the weather is Thunderstorm. You search your deck, hand, or graveyard for 3 copies of that card. Remove them from the game. If you successfully remove 4 total copies, so all 4 from the game, or this one would go to the graveyard, the one you're casting. If you successfully remove those 3 copies, you destroy everything on the field that's not a Magic Stone, not a J-Ruler. That's really cool. I think that having a 3-drop kind of total board wipe does clear both sides of the board, which is pretty consistent for blue board wipes. It's just very, very interesting, and the fact that it only gains Quick Cast if it's in your hand and the weather is Thunderstorm means that you could just choose to not make it Thunderstorm, cast it, and nuke the board anyway, which might make it more safe from like Ferris Spell. Next up, we have Ray the Black Owl, 2-drop 5/7 Beast, can't be attacked, and then inverts at the beginning of your main phase. So by itself, pretty survivable, and it just needs to survive 1 turn to be able to flip. Turns into Zero, who is an 8/9 human inverse with flying, and she says as long as she's on the board, entities you control gain. So she grants this ability to all those other things: stones, additions, J-Rulers, even herself. Whenever this card is targeted by a spell or ability, cancel it. This ability triggers only once per turn. So all of your entities, every turn, essentially, get 1 free protection, 1 free kind of mini cancel. That is crazy awesome, and I'm very happy about the fact that in this case, an inverse can still be easily removed, but she does protect herself. So this is going to be something where I think maybe we even see something like the Black Tears be sideboarded in decks that aren't Scheherazade, just so you can clear things without having to target them. Then we have Bird of Demise, 2-drop 6/6 Quick Cast Dinosaur. If it has Null, when it dies, your opponent loses 600 life unless they sack a creature. That is really not very good for a Null effect. Stat lines are really bad, and it doesn't have flying. Maybe in Limited, potentially, you know, if you need to kind of win the game when those games kind of go to a place where you don't have a hand. But ultimately, early game, this is just not going to do much for you. You're never really going to get that Null effect. Knight of the Black Moon, 4-drop 10/10 Were-Rabbit. When it enters the field, each player discards a card. I really wish it was just your opponent, but there's got to be, I guess, some costs negative to that 4-drop 10/10 slot. I don't really like this card very much at all. The artwork is really, really cool, though. Raise Gale, 1-drop Chant with Quick Cast. Target Resonator gains -500 defense. This is really nice. It's a nice real replacement for Unseen Pressure, I think. It doesn't target J-Rulers, which I think is also important. Would make it way better if it could target J-Rulers, but I think even by itself, it's a nice little darkness replacement for True Blade. And then we have our green. We're back to wind. So we have Cecil and Tia. It is 4-drop 10/10 Elf. Pay 1 to deal 100 damage to target J-Res, and then you can tap to recover 2 special Magic Stone or target Magic Stones. This is really cool. I'm really excited about this for Limited. I think that as a bomb in Limited, this could be really, really huge. You can play it, and then like the next turn, you can just start using it to ping a bunch of damage kind of wherever you need to, and then be able to recover your stones and ping something more. New Frontiers constructed. I'm not sure how solid this would be, but overall, I think this is just a really cool kind of top-end elf to be able to play in Limited or in like elf ball decks that really get a lot of will to be able to make use of. Next up, we have our ruler. So CL, Ancestor of the Priestess. So elf, so who's there? Lend you my body, you say? Can't be helped just this once. So that's some interesting flavor text there. But elf, judgments for 1, energizes for 1 green. And at the end of your turn, you attach an aura in your graveyard to this card. So the more aura gets attached to it, obviously something's going to happen. And we flip over into Phantom Wind Fiethsing. So CL seems to kind of get possessed by Fiethsing a little bit. So it's a 10/10 elf. When it enters the field, you choose up to 1 for each aura attached to it. You get to buff up a Resonator you control by 4 +1/+1 counters, or put 2 4/4 Wind Spirit Resonator tokens with flying into the field, or recover 3 Magic Stones, or gain 1,000 life, or draw 2 cards, or deal 800 damage to a J-Res. If there are 3 or more auras attached to it, it gains Imperishable, which I think is pretty interesting. And when this card is destroyed, all of the auras attached to it get removed from the game, so you can't use those auras more than once. So I think this is pretty cool. I'm really glad for the fact that she doesn't have kind of a will fixing ability, because that would make, I think, really a lot of really crazy stuff for like auras. If she could cast auras for any color, it would really make her kind of insanely good. But I think as she is, you know, you have to kind of splash into weird color combinations potentially, and considering when rotation might happen and we might not have the dual stones, that might get super weird. But I mean, the effects are pretty balanced. I think it's mostly stuff for your side of the board, which is kind of what Fiethsing's always been about. Like Fiethsing's always been about like protecting yourself on like further advancing your own board rather than hurting your opponents. So I rarely doubt you're going to see that 800 damage to target J/Res being used, really, because 800 damage is rarely enough to kill a J ruler. And I think you're probably going to want to go with some other effects before then. Keep in mind, though, that a single Lorite cancels all of her effects. So I think that's pretty relevant, because she doesn't have a way to give herself barrier. And the Imperishable for a green ruler is probably a little bit crazy. But again, you have to get to 3 auras, so it's kind of a little bit of a trade-off. And I think that that deck is going to be really wide color-based to be able to make it so that you play enough auras based on the auras we've seen so far. So also keep in mind that you don't get to choose the order in which the effects resolve. You choose the modes and then they resolve in the order that they're printed on the card. So that's just something to keep in mind. So speaking of auras, she does have an aura here, Winds of Guidance. It is a 2-drop non-quick cast aura. It says search your deck for 3 chance, put them into your graveyard, then shuffle your deck. So obviously this is a way to be able to splash those auras that maybe you're not going to be playing in your color base, so you can get them into the graveyard real quick. I don't think you're going to want to care about wasting a turn to flood your graveyard with auras that might be out of color, especially in the early game, but it is still pretty an interesting like concept. And lastly, we have the Ethereal Wind Magic Stone, a special magic stone that taps to produce green, or you can banish it to put an aura from your RFG into your hands. So after Fiethsing dies, you can kind of bring those auras back to your hand to potentially use again by sacking a stone. So all in all, pretty cool. I'm excited to see kind of what happens with Fiethsing. She gets a lot of versatility, feels very much like Alice, Drifter in the Worlds, and that was a ruler that didn't see a super ton of play. Now keep in mind that this is a green ruler, right? So everyone's getting a little bit excited, and the judgment is 1, so that's like a 1-drop 10/10, right? But it doesn't have access to flying. You know, it's a 1-drop 10/10 that can flip into some tokens, which is what Fiethsing used to be able to do anyway. It can buff stuff up, which is something Fiethsing used to do. It's kind of like this very utilitarian ruler, but I think it feels pretty okay, because again, you have to take your time to be able to build up to the point where you really get that true utility. Like, it takes time to be able to get those auras attached to be able to make that flip really meaningful enough. And I definitely think that there are ways to remove Imperishable, and I think that if this character dies, you know, you want to obviously make it so you can use her more than once to get all those effects, but just like old Alice was. But if Imperishable, you kind of have to have Imperishable to make sure that can happen, since there's no clear way to attach auras to it right now. But ultimately, we'll just kind of have to see kind of what people think. Let me know what you guys' thoughts are in the comment section down below. I know this is a lot. We will be coming back probably with another video, full week recap just in one video, starting next week, and then come back tomorrow for the deck profile, the first of the 2 Wanderer deck profiles. But that's all for me for tonight. Hope you guys have a great day, and until next time, this is DMO73 signing off.
Huge thanks to the patrons of the channel. You see their names here on the screen as well as down below in the description. They are what help make this channel run and help me do these awesome projects for you guys. If you feel like joining the channel and getting access to all the cool perks that come with being a patron, click on the P on the screen or the link down below. Thanks so much. See you next time.